Hey guys, Dr. Frank here with Northtown Chiropractic and Injury Rehab. Today I'm here with Blake Zaccanino from Shaw & Shaw. Blake, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, anytime. So this is part 2 of our video series that we're making for you guys on personal injury and no-fault cases. So this applies to car accidents and personal injury stuff. So in this series of the video, what I wanted to talk about was the importance of seeking proper medical care and the difference in category of injury, right? So I know, for example, if you're in a car accident and you break an arm, that's very different from just straining your neck. And the documentation that supports that's different. So Blake, if you wouldn't mind, can you explain the different categories of injury and how this works?
Sure. So, we talked in the first video about NoFault, which is from your own insurance company that applies regardless of who is at fault. The second portion is going after another person's insurance policy, which is where fault and injury comes into play. So basically, if you want to go after somebody else's insurance policy, the court will be asked 3 questions. The first will be who is at fault. The second will be what type of injury do you have? Do you have a qualifying injury that will allow you to get some money? And then the third question will be how much is are your injuries worth? And as far as the injuries that qualify, as Dr. Frank was talking about, there are certain injuries that are clear cut where, for example, if you broke a bone, if you, God forbid, lost a limb or something to that effect, where it's very clear cut that you broke a bone. Okay, the court will move to the question of how much is that broken bone worth? You know that you're going to get some money as long as the court finds the other person was at fault or at least partially at fault. But there are other injuries which are very common in, which I'm sure Dr. Frank will talk about in motor vehicle cases, with herniated discs in your back, cervical strain, lumbar strain, thoracic strain, everything like that. Those are probably the more common injuries in motor vehicle cases, and almost, it's whether right or wrong, the law kind of holds them at a lower standard, even though they're probably, as Dr. Frank could probably explain, more painful and more difficult to handle than with a broken bone. That would be more clear cut.
We've talked about this all the time, and you see it, guys, when you go in, and correct me if I'm wrong, for a lot of things, there's kind of a blue book value to the injury, right? So
Right.
A broken finger's worth this, a broken ankle's worth this. When it comes to soft tissue injury, and this is the urgency of seeking proper medical attention. I'll give you an example that I'm sure you're familiar with. Say you're in a car accident and you go to an urgent care center and they write down that you have a sprain, strain, whiplash injury on your neck. 4 or 5 days go by and now all of a sudden you have numbness and tingling going down your arm. You can't sleep. Perhaps you're a teacher and now you can't write on the chalkboard or on the whiteboard because now you're losing function in your hand. This is all of a sudden a serious injury. But now, if you didn't seek proper follow-up from that urgent care visit, and if your x-rays looked okay, but you never sought an MRI or sought nerve conduction studies, that injury to the courts is just going to look like a sprain, strain injury. If that's the only documentation you guys have to work with, that's all you got, right? So if you then go see a medical provider who's going to do a detailed exam, who's going to get you the correct testing, not only does that benefit the patient, because now we know what we're dealing with and what we have to treat, but that, I could only imagine, is going to be beneficial for this individual's case. And I want to make it clear too, this isn't about landing a big settlement. I actually had an insurance person tell me this once. It's a matter of, he called it a living death. This is where you're alive, the bills are coming in, you're injured and you can't pay for them now because you failed to meet deadlines that we talked about in the first video. Your physician unfortunately failed to properly document your injuries. So yeah. I'm sure you guys see that all the time, where lack of documentation, just diagnosing something that maybe was a really bad disc herniation as a sprain, strain, probably ruins things for it.
Yeah, because in most of the cases that we see, the more common injuries are soft tissue injuries, meaning herniated discs, strains, and things like that. Now, there are certain, there is a category of injury that involves basically you being unable to do your everyday activities for a certain period of time. And the court requires medical documentation that really lays that out. So you come in to see Dr. Frank, he says, okay, hey, this person was hurt, they can't work, they have these limitations, and if you don't go to him right when you're having these issues, that time frame that is required by the court to entitle you some money, could be blown, because they can't really, what you say and your subjective own complaints are one thing, but your objective, meaning medical records, is really more important. And as far as just to kind of build on what Dr. Frank was saying about a living death, that's really how things are set up in America. Is we don't do an eye for an eye. We don't do, you broke my leg, I'm going to break your leg. We go, okay, the way that you resolve these issues is through a lawsuit and through money. And really, it's kind of it's a little bit of a deeper thought, but the reason why we have juries and they're made up of people who live where the injury happened is because the jurors are really the ones that set the bar to say what conduct is okay. How it was said somewhere in I forget what book it was, but that jurors are really the guardians of the community, and are the ones that can really make it safer by way of a jury verdict or awarding money to one person or another. And really, it's all about safety, and it's all about setting the bar of what is acceptable and what is safe and what is not, and making up for the harms and losses that you've caused, or that have been
inflicted upon that person.
Thrusted on you, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the big things. We see that all the time, and I really try and emphasize that to people. Yes, there may be a payout, but this is about taking care of basic life expenses. You need the medical documentation, and I know this too. I know you guys deal with this. You guys have to realize, on the other side of the coin, the insurance companies, and there's these other examinations that you might go through, there's going to be people the whole entire time arguing that you're not injured. Even when you are injured, there is a whole group of people who are going to be telling your attorney, telling your chiropractor, telling your physician that you did not sustain an injury during this accident. So this is why I think it's so important that people do retain an attorney. That's not an argument you want to try and go out on your own. I have seen people with broken ribs. I have seen people tossed from vehicles being told that they did not have a serious injury because they didn't have the documentation to support it. They didn't have the attorney to support it. So yeah. I really think that's very important stuff. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, Blake. Anything else you want to add? Or
thanks for your time. No,
yeah.
I guess I would just say that it's just important to understand that, and that it's, if you're hurt and it was through no fault of your own, you should not be ashamed of taking advantage of benefits that are established through your own insurance carrier. And you also shouldn't feel ashamed of trying to make up in some way for the injuries and difficulties that you sustained as a result of being hurt. It's it's very important, and you can never, if you broke a bone, it'll heal, but it's never going to be the same. So you can't.
It's true.
I just don't want people to feel ashamed about, making up for the harms and losses that were caused.
Get rid of that stigma. Guys, thank you for joining us. I hope that helps. We can't wait to see you next time.
Thank you.